This video I'm going to be talking about the decision making section of the UCAT, but before that I do have to apologise. I've been away for absolutely ages. I've had graduations from uni, birthdays, and as you can see by my tan, I've been away on holiday and things like that, so I do have to apologise because my last video I said they would be up shortly, but it's been absolutely ages. So in this video I'm going to be talking about the decision making section of the UCAT, which is the second section you'll encounter in this exam. It involves using logic to infer answers from a range of different question styles, which we will get onto in a little bit. In my decision making section, I got 710. It wasn't my highest score, it wasn't my lowest score, but I did get about this sort of consistently throughout my mocks, throughout my timed questions. I did sort of get the same amount of answers right and wrong. So I was quite stable on the decision making side of things. So in the decision making section of the UCAT, you're going to be given 29 questions and it's going to give you 31 minutes to answer this. So as you can probably tell, this is the longest section in the UCAT, but it is important not to become complacent to this and relax too much throughout the section because you will still be under quite a lot of time pressure. The questions in decision making can be in a few different formats. They can be through texts, where you'll get a sort of big block of text and you'll have to agree, disagree, so choose the best argument even in some cases. You can get questions that are shapes, essentially like squares, triangles, circles, and you have to infer an equation almost from it. You can get positioning questions, you can get orientation questions, and I'll get onto that a bit sort of in a few minutes. So the first tip that I'm going to say for the decision making section straight away is just the essentials of defining yes and no. So yes in decision making, as far as it goes here, has to be 100% certain. It states it in the text and you can 100% infer a conclusion from the text that you're given or the diagram that you're given. No in the decision making means either you can't tell, i.e. there's not enough information to tell, or it's directly disproven in the text or information or diagram, etc. So the second tip I've got for the decision making section is an absolute must, and you're going to need to get yourself a whiteboard and pen to study off and to get used to working through it, just like you will in the exam. So in the exam, in most cases, you'll get a whiteboard and marker. I think in some positions you can get a scrap paper and a pencil, but I think in most positions it is a whiteboard and marker. So this is particularly vital for questions that are sort of like orientation questions, I found. So some of the questions will be like this, so I hope you can actually see this. So you'll get a sort of a table like this, and you'll have, say in clockwise position, you'll have person X, to the left of person X you'll have person Y, opposite person Y you'll have person Z, next to person Z you'll have person A, etc, etc, and they'll sort of give you orientations based on the previous information, and they'll build upon it and build upon it and build upon it. And if you don't have sort of a visual aid like this, referring to the answer is actually quite a lot of mental load that you don't essentially need. You don't necessarily need this when you've got sort of a lot of time pressure in the exam, and having a whiteboard basically can take a lot of this mental load off you. Some of the other questions that they can give you that the whiteboard is quite useful in decision making for is the sort of like ownership questions. So it'll give you maybe a list of names, so say like Josh, Adam, Thomas, Peter, and then it'll say Josh has something like a white tie. So I would, in the exam, I would always do something like this, where it would be Josh has a white tie, Adam has black shoes, Peter has, etc. And you can sort of build upon it, and just in the same way that I mentioned before, it does take a lot of the mental load off your short-term memory in the exam, which is quite vital to do for sort of coming together with a quick exam answer. Getting it down in front of you is quite good to reflect back on and sort of refer to throughout the question. The next sort of question type / tip that I'm going to talk about is the syllogisms. So the syllogisms, you will get a table and you'll have to say yes or no depending on whether the conclusion holds true or the conclusion doesn't hold true. I again found whiteboards to be really important in things like this. So in a lot of the questions, what they'll do, and a lot of the other sort of YouTube videos talk about things like this, where it's like some fish are sea creatures. So you've got this bit in the middle, which is sort of the overlapping thing, where you can't infer that all the fish are sea creatures because they don't totally overlap, and it doesn't say explicitly in the question that all fish are sea creatures. But you can infer that some are. I found this sort of style to do syllogisms on the whiteboard to be okay in some situations, but I found a better way through sort of a lot of the study myself, and I found it to be like this because you could go into more depth. So say we've got fish here, some fish are sea creatures, which is going to be this half. And this section here are the fish that aren't sea creatures. So then from that, then the question could build on this and say something like, all sea creatures. So then we've got the full sort of bar here. All sea creatures are yellow. And then it could say some yellow sea creatures are etc, etc, etc. They do the same thing in every question. It's sort of built on the same logic of giving you a lot of mental stuff to keep in your head at the same time. So I've got such as in the previous video, I have a Word document with all of my notes before the exam, and I do have this sort of syllogisms in terms of the ones that look like this, just for sort of reference to, not that you have to use them or not, the ones like this, where that's like some, you get ones which are like all, so you would get all, which is the full thing, and you can use that for reference as well. I will put that in the video description, just like I did in the previous video. So another tip in terms of the decision making, which I sort of mentioned in the start of this video, but I will say it again because it is important, is the time management. You are given 31 minutes, you do think you have a lot of time throughout the exam and throughout this section specifically, but what they can do, which is quite sneaky, they have a certain number of syllogisms that they have to give you. I think off the top of my head maybe it's 9, don't take that for like fact, it's a certain number, and what they can do is they can give you say 7 at the start, and they can space 2 say towards the end of the thing. So in a lot of my mock tests, what I would do is I would think that all the syllogisms were out of the way, I would have plenty of time to go, and I would relax a little bit, and then I would find that towards the end of exam I'd have maybe 2 minutes to do the last question, which I thought would be a relatively easy, maybe just a logic question. I thought it would be relatively easy, but then I would realise that it was a full syllogism that I would have to look and refer back to, and I just didn't have time to do it, which was essentially just a total loss of the question for me, which isn't ideal. And the last tip that I'm going to do, which I've actually had to film 3 times now because I'm just actually not able to do them anymore, is the shape equation questions. So at the start of my UCAT study, so about this time last year, I did encounter these and I had no idea how to do them because I found the videos on YouTube a little bit difficult to sort of understand. So hopefully I'm going to be able to explain it relatively easy in the way that I found I could do it. So you've got your whiteboard and you've got your pen here, so I'll put the question on the screen as I'm doing this throughout the whole question, so you guys can pause it and sort of answer the question yourself if you think you're able to. So the top line here, we've got a triangle plus a square equals a circle. And the main outcome from this question is to sort of fill in the gap at the end. So we're going to have x plus x equals y plus, and then we're going to have a question mark, and we're going to need to figure out what shape that question mark is going to be at the end. It sounds very abstract, but I think it will make sense a little bit more once I get into it. So from here we can sort of straight away allocate each shape a random number to sort of fit the algebra equation. So here, for example, we've got a triangle, we can say 1 plus 2 equals 3. So from the start now, triangle equals 1, square equals 2, circle equals 3, and then we can sort of use these and make these hold true for the rest of the algebra equation. The next line, we've got a circle plus a square, I hope you can actually see this, equals a rectangle. So we don't have the rectangle here, but we do have a circle and a square. So we've got 3 plus 2 equals 5, and then now we can see that the rectangle equals 5. So we've got 4 things here now that we've filled in just from 2 lines of this sort of algebra. I think these are the only shapes that come up in the equation. Yep, these are the only shapes that come up in the equation. So I'll skip straight to the last line now that we have all the unknowns as sort of a known now. The final line, and we can see if this holds true. Circle plus triangle plus square equals rectangle plus blank. So we can refer to this now, and this is yet another reason why my tip is really good about a whiteboard, because now we can refer straight back to this at the top. We've got 3 plus a triangle, which is a 1, plus a square, which is a 2. So we've got 3 plus 2 plus 1 is 6. So we've got 6 on this side, equals a rectangle, which is 5, and then we've got to fill in the blank here. So we've got to make them both equal 6 on each side. We've got 6 here, 5 plus 1 obviously, to get to a 6. And then the question, I don't have the answers here, but what I will ask is essentially which shape fills in the blank. So we know here that the 1 is the blank, and we can again reference up here that the triangle. The answer is going to be triangle for this. So again, as I've said throughout this whole video, there is going to be a lot of mental load that you're going to have to take if you don't have a whiteboard, but the whiteboards massively help out. And to be honest, if it wasn't for the whiteboards, I would not have done half as good as I did in the decision making sections. The one last tip I will say for the decision making section is, similar to the verbal reasoning section, you will get to know questions that you just don't like, and you will get to know questions that you can't do. For me, there was they do syllogisms. I think you'll maybe get 1 or 2 in your syllogism sort of mix of questions where they give you a massive block of text about random sort of like, they'll give you, it's almost like statistics they'll put in it. So basically they'll put a big block of text about a random information, and you have to get the sort of reasonable conclusions from it. I found I would always leave these to the end because most of the time I would trip up on these anyway. They give you, they really try and trip you up in these questions. So as a recommendation, if you haven't really started your decision making section yet, I would say if you see these in any mocks, any mini mocks, just skip them straight away. As I have in the other videos, I've got in the video description my sort of notes as to when I was going through it. So I'll put that in the description down below. And yes, the next video I'm actually going to film a little bit sooner. I'm going to film it maybe tomorrow or the day after, edited for a few more days in the future.